anybody need a copy of lesson number 8 that we're studying this morning? I am kind of surprised that Keith made it through that song. He feels about like I do, I think. I am reminded of the time that 2 years ago when I was in India, I felt this bad, and one day I spoke 5 times, well, actually 4 times. We had 5 services that day, and Dina Dial let me off in the afternoon service, number 4, and did that one, and then at night I came in and I could barely speak at all, and I made it through the lesson that night, and I said the last couple of words of the lesson. I did that, and it was gone. So he gave me just enough strength to make it, and I trust that he will do that today. And I hope he does that for Keith as well as he continues to lead singing. If not, we'll just pitch in and all of us help. But I'm going to stand over here where I can lean also, if you don't mind, please. That way I don't fall down on you. Living as unto the Lord. We've been talking about the fact that man, since the fall, in Genesis chapter 3, has been trying to get back to the Garden of Eden, and God has made a plan to get man back to a Garden of Eden on this earth, and a better Garden of Eden in eternity. And that plan involved a lot of things going on. It involved employing a nation of people to bring forth the Messiah. It involved the death of the Messiah on the cross as a propitiation for our sins. And it involved bringing together a kingdom, once again, a kingdom, but not a physical kingdom, but a spiritual kingdom. And these are the people of God, which we're studying, is what we're studying overall. And so in lesson number 8, we're talking about living as unto the Lord. And he says at the beginning of the lesson, and we'll probably finish this lesson this morning, I'm going to try to, because there's actually a few things that I want to expand upon at the end of these series of lessons, some application areas that I think we can go into at that point. And so some of these lessons are not going to take 2 class periods like we have been doing, and I think this will be one of them. But he says that in the beginning, those who have heard the call of the gospel and obeyed from the heart have not simply joined a club. Ruth and I are members of the Temple Terrace Country Club. We're what you call, grief. I've forgotten now. We're sort of the side members. I can't golf. Not that I ever want to golf. I'm not interested in chasing a little white ball around and dropping it in gopher holes. That doesn't appeal to me at all. At any rate, we're members of that country club. And every Wednesday night they have what they call Wow Wednesday, where they do a special meal and all of that. Well, you know what? We go to that when we want to, when we feel like it. We go over there for a function or 2 every now and then. We've been over there for a July the 4th meal, once in a while, things like that. But, if we don't feel like going to something, we don't. It's no big deal. But when you become a Christian, you're not a member of a society or an organization like that, where you can just kind of give it what you want to and not do what you don't want to. You're either in it all the way, or you're not. It's kind of like when someone forms a commune, and I think we all know what commune, I'm not saying that it's, some aspects of a commune are all we're talking about here. Not every aspect of commune. But people actually move in there, and they live there. They are 100% in that thing. Out in Waco, Texas, that nutcase out there formed a commune, and the people moved in there, And they actually died for the cause in the end because, you know, that was what they were expected to do. That guy down in Jim Smith down in Jim Jones, thank you. Jonestown, down in Guyana, I think it was. That, you know, he started giving the people this Kool-Aid, and then he told them it was laced with poison, they were all going to die. Well, after a while, they got used to that, so when he really gave them the poison Kool-Aid, they all drank it without question, and they all died for him. And, you know, it's kind of like that. It's a commitment that involves your entire life, and not just a membership, as it were, that you can take or leave as you please. Let's turn and read from Romans chapter 12. Let's read the whole chapter, Romans chapter 12. Somebody read it who either has King James or the New King James, one or the other. I prefer that language when I'm Romans 12, but just, if it was up to me, we'd all speak King James English.
I beseech you, verse 1.
Go ahead, yeah, the whole chapter.
I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. For I say, through the grace given unto me, to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith. For as we have many members in one body, and all members have not the same office, so we, being many, are one body in Christ, and every one members one of another, having then gifts differing according to the grace that is given to us. Whether prophecy, let us prophesy according to the proportion of faith. Or ministry, let us wait on our ministry. Or he that teacheth, on teaching. Or he that exhorteth, on exhortation. He that giveth, let him do it with simplicity. He that ruleth, with diligence. He that showeth mercy, with cheerfulness. Let love be without dissimulation. Abhor that which is evil. Cleave to that which is good. Be kindly affectionate one to another with brotherly love, in honor, preferring one another. Not slothful in business, fervent in spirit, serving the Lord. Rejoicing in hope, patient in tribulation, continuing instant in prayer, distributing to the necessity of the saints, given to hospitality. Bless them which persecute you, bless and curse not. Rejoice with them that do rejoice, and weep with them that weep. Be of the same mind one toward another. Mind not high things, but condescend to men of low estate. Be not wise in your own conceits. Recompense to no man evil for evil. Provide things honest in the sight of all men. If it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourself, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Excuse me. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in doing so, thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good.
Okay. What has he done here in Romans chapter 12? Why is this inserted here in this book? That's one of my wide open questions. You're not going to know where. What he's done here is he's summarized the entirety of the first 11 chapters. He's been teaching all of these things in more detail in the first 11 chapters, and now he just comes in and he summarizes it. Beginning with what he says in the first verse of Romans 12. It's kind of like the story of the chicken and the pig that came upon this starving man. And the chicken looked at the pig and said, I think what we need to do for this man is to make him a meal of bacon and eggs. And the pig looked at the chicken and said, that's easy for you to say. For you, it only requires a contribution. For me, it's a total commitment. He says here that this thing of Christianity is a total commitment. It's a living sacrifice. Now, Brother Turner mentions Colossians chapter 3 here. In Colossians 3, it says pretty much the same. It says exactly the same thing, just a little bit different wording. Throughout the New Testament, it tells us the same thing over and over and over again. This thing of Christianity is a total commitment. It's not something that we just enter into and we come to church and while we've done our duty to the Lord for the week, now we go live like we want to. But that's the way too many of our brethren, and I'm talking about our brethren, think that it is. You know, you talk about, a friend of mine was a Greek Orthodox, and I worked with him. I say he's a friend, I worked with him, co-worker, years ago in my first air conditioning job. And when he was going to get married, his wife was Roman Catholic, he was Greek Orthodox, and I found out the hard way, you don't ever call Greek Orthodox Catholic. They get very offended at that, even though they are Catholic. He was going to a marriage counseling session with her priest because it was required, so the church, you know, both churches would sanction the marriage, and the priest asked him, said, do you go to Mass, my son? And he said, occasionally, Father, and the wife, you know, or the fiancée laughed, and she said, yeah, Christmas and Easter. And, you know, the priest said, well, that's good, but you need to go more, basically. But that's the way a lot of people look at Christianity is, you know, well, we'll go to church and then that's it. And most people in the world tend to look at their religion as being something of that nature. But, you know, it's really more like these jihadists, these radical Islamic people. You know, they strap bombs onto themselves and they're willing to give their lives for this. Well, are we willing to give our life for the Lord? In Ephesians chapter 5, you know, he talks about then marriage as the next paragraph. But really, that's not talking about marriage. What is it talking about? It's talking about Christ and the church, isn't it? It's what Paul says. Now, everything that applies there applies to Christ and the church, but it also applies to the husband and wife relationship and the children relationship, to marriage and the home. And it says that Christ gave himself for her, his bride, the church. Does that just mean he died for her? I know a lot of men that say, oh, I'd take a bullet for my wife. I'd jump in front of her and take a bullet for her. But then they go out and they won't live for her. Christ lived for his bride for some 33 years before he died for her. He lived a sinlessly perfect life for her. And I'll just say right now that 90% of the time, the reason that marriages fail is the husband's fault, primarily. In my, you know, limited experience with that, it's primarily the husband's fault when a marriage fails. Because when a husband is what he ought to be, wives want to submit to him because they know that every decision he makes, he's thinking of what's best for her. And he's trying, he may not succeed, but he's trying to do what's best for her. And he considers her feelings and her thoughts on the matter before he makes a decision. And that's the kind of man that you want to follow. You know, Patton was a hard-nosed, tough leader, but his troops in World War II would go straight through the jaws of hell for him if he commanded them to, because they knew that he would be there with them. And they knew that everything he asked them to do, he was willing to do himself. And that he wanted to do what was right, to win the battle and to get them out of it alive. And so they were dedicated to him because he was a good leader. Husbands need to be good leaders. I got a little ahead of myself there. So overall, this thing, Christianity, the point we're getting to here is that it's a total commitment on our part. Now, Romans 12 breaks some of that out in the ways that our book does here later on. But he gives us things that the principles of Christianity apply to marriage. We already talked about that a good bit. Husbands, love your wives even as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for it. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands. Love your husbands and do not be bitter toward them. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. All of these things are a part of this total commitment to Christianity. Now, in the old law, is there anything in that marriage law today that wasn't in the law that Moses gave to Israel? Is there anything really different about the law that Christ gave through his apostles regarding marriage that's different from what Moses gave?
Jesus said there wasn't.
Remember that Jesus said, a lot of people will say, oh, you've heard it said. Jesus said. But Jesus was saying, you've heard it said. He wasn't saying the law said. He saying, this is what your teachers of the law have said the law says. Go ahead.
Well, Jesus clarified things, but what he says is what the law had to say. But I say to you, if you even think these things, if your attitude is bad, he made it a point to make sure that your attitude had to be there as well as just obeying it in a physical sense. As far as marriage vows and how you treat one another and those things. But it's no different than what the old law had to say.
Jesus said, you have heard it said that he who committeth adultery shall die to death. But I say unto you that he who looks upon a woman to lust after in his heart, what did the law say about coveting another man's wife? Thou shalt not covet. What is coveting? Looking upon a woman to lust after in your heart. Or a man, depends on which gender you are. It's looking upon someone else to lust after something you don't have the right to. And Moses said that's wrong. Was God okay? Let me start. I'm fumbling here. Was God okay with divorce under the law of Moses?
No.
Not at all.
Only because of the hardness of their heart that he let them do it.
Malachi said, I hate divorce, said Jehovah. The word there is the word for despise. Absolutely rejecting it. God did not want them to divorce. Because of the hardness of their heart, Moses allowed them out. But only because of that, Jesus said. We spend way too much time, by the way, just like the Jews did. The Jews spent too much time talking about the exception to the marriage law, and not enough time talking about the marriage law. And we spend way too much time talking about the exception to God's rule on marriage, and not enough time talking about the rules that he has for making a successful marriage. And if we did that, I think we'd have more successful marriages. Servants and masters. In Colossians 3, he goes on to talk about this aspect of our lives. Now, how does that affect us today? Do we have slaves and masters today?
We have employees and employers.
Okay, just insert some different words in there. Insert employee and employer for slave and master, or bondservant and master. It's the same principle. When we're serving our boss, in my business for years and years, I drove a service truck. I was out by myself, and the boss couldn't look over my shoulder. Now, we've got some tools today that let me look over my employees' shoulders a little better. I've got GPS things in the truck, and I can go to the computer and I can see where every one of my trucks is at any given moment. So I can kind of tell where those guys are and what they're doing. And I can tell when they stop for an hour at a gas station or whatever. And I've had that happen before. But when I was doing it, we didn't have any of that stuff. And so basically, it I was on my own when I left the office in the morning until I called in on the two-way radio at night to say I'm finished for the night. I was out there, and if it took me an hour and a half to get to the job, and the boss asked why, and I said because I got stuck behind a wreck and the traffic was stopped and I had to sit there for a half hour. I couldn't turn around, I couldn't do anything. And that happened occasionally. And he accepted that because he didn't have a choice. But was that really what happened? Or did I pull over in here to the electronics store or whatever and waste an hour of his time shopping for a new television set or whatever it was I wanted? You know, he had no way of knowing. That was up to me. But you know who always was looking over my shoulder? God. God always did. I heard somebody say that just as I did, so that's good. You were on the same page with me. Thank you. And, you know, that's the way a Christian lives his life. He realizes that God is always there. God knows what's going on. What am I giving to my master? What am I giving to my employer? Am I giving him my best? Because that's what I agreed to give him when I hired him. He agreed to give me a certain wage. And I've heard people say, oh, you know, he's cheating us. He's not giving us what we deserve. Wait a minute. Did you agree to come to work for, I'm going to pull a number out of the air, $10 an hour? Well, yeah, I agreed to, but that's not enough. Well, you know what? You agreed to work for that, and you agreed to give him your all for that. That's fair. Because that's what you agreed to when you hired into this job. And so you need to continue to give him your best. Because it's what you said you would do. You keep your word. Now you may find out or think that the job is worth a lot more than that. Well, guess what? We do live in a free society. You can go find another job if you can. For more money, if you can. But it's the same principle there. And masters, I've known of some masters that were just terrible people. Did I turn this on yesterday? That were terrible people. You know, there was a movie made about, who was that hotel heiress that was, I remember Suzanne Plachette played her in it. She was just mean. I can't remember. Pardon?
In New York?
In New York, yes.
Crazy.
Yeah, she was nuts.
Left the money to the cat.
I think she eventually did, as a matter of fact. But she was just, I mean, she treated her employees like dirt. Withheld wages that they had earned, and they finally put her in prison because of it. And you know, I mean, I don't know. I wasn't at the trial, didn't have time to be at the trial, so I don't know what really went on. But from what the movie showed, she deserved it because she was just an evil, evil person. And but bosses don't treat your employees that way. You treat them fairly. You give them fair working conditions. You pay them fairly. And treat them like you would want to be treated if you were an employee. And employees, give your boss what you would want an employee to give him if you were the master. That's the rule here. And so when we look at all of these things in the law of Christ and we see that this is a total commitment, this is what it involves. The New Testament does not go into as much detail about our day-to-day commitment to the Lord as the Old Testament did, as the law of Moses did. And the reason for that was because these standards had not been codified. They had not been set down in writing before. Moses actually sat down and began writing them, and the prophets that followed him. And so those day-to-day rules and regulations for life had to be put down. And that gives some people the idea that the law of Moses was not a law of the heart, it was a law of action. And then the law of Christ is a law of the heart because it doesn't talk as much about the day-to-day life of the Christian. But it does talk really just as much about the day-to-day life of the Christian. It just says it in different words. And Moses put it down in a codified form because, as we said, it had never been done before. And it had to be done. But when you want to look at the principles and the ideals that a Christian should live up to, you go back to the Old Covenant. And you look at how servants were to treat their masters in the Old Covenant, how masters were to treat their servants, and how they were to deal with the ancient landmarks for their boundaries, and how they were to deal with marriage laws and things like that. It's really the same. There's not really, I mean, some of the nuances, some of the specifics are different. For example, we don't remember the seventh day to keep it holy. We remember the first day to keep it unto the Lord, because that's the Lord's day. But things like that have changed, but really not much has changed about what we're supposed to do and what we're supposed to give to God. In civil citizenship, under Solomon's rule, Solomon was a hard taskmaster. He really epitomized the things that Moses told them in the beginning that a king was going to do to them. He conscripted their young men and their daughters into his service. He had them building great building projects going on all over the kingdom. He expanded the kingdom really to the fullness of what God had promised to Abraham that he was going to give him as far as the land goes. But he did it at the expense of the people's freedom to a large extent. And when he died, the people came to his son Rehoboam and said, "We would like some relief." And Rehoboam very foolishly listened to his young friends instead of the old wise counselors that Solomon had used. And Rehoboam said, "You think my father was rough, I'm going to be rougher. My little finger is going to be thicker than his thigh," as it were. And the people rebelled against him. And of course, he lost 10 of the 12 tribes. But the people were required to give obedience to Solomon under his rule. They weren't allowed to just slack off and say, "No, you can't have my son or my daughter," because that was the law of the land. And God told them, when you put a king in, this is what's going to happen to you. And they put the king in, and guess what? They got what they asked for. Be careful what you ask for, because you just might get it. They did. And what happened to them under that government rule was not something that was very pleasant. Later on, when the prophets told them, Jeremiah in particular told Judah, "You need to submit to Nebuchadnezzar, and you need to give in to him." Well, Nebuchadnezzar was not who they thought was a righteous king, but God put him in place. And they needed to submit to Nebuchadnezzar. When they didn't, God allowed Nebuchadnezzar to come down and completely destroy Jerusalem, because that's what they got for their disobedience to God. And in Romans 13, who was Caesar when Paul wrote Romans 13? Who was in charge of
I believe it was Nero.
Yeah. Was there anything good about Nero?
If there was, it isn't talked about much.
Yeah. I don't know of anything good about Nero. They call him amoral often. It's how he's referred to. He had no sense of morality whatsoever. He didn't anything that he wanted was right. I still think that's immoral, but by definition, from a historical standpoint, maybe not. I don't know. But it was whatever he wanted was what was right. And he almost single-handedly brought Rome to ruin. But Christians were told to submit to the higher powers, for there were no powers but that God had put them in.
Well, biblically, it's immoral. Immoral what he was. When you read in Joshua, it's Joshua. No, it's Judges. I'm sorry, where everybody did what was right in their own sight. And what were they doing? They were practicing idolatry, immorality, those things.
Mm-hmm.
But they did what was right in their own eyes, in their own sight. Same with Nero.
So, but nonetheless, no matter how bad the ruler of the country is, no matter how terrible the government might be, if we lived under Stalin's communist Russia, guess who we need to obey?
Stalin.
we obey Stalin. Insofar as we can and still be Christians. Now that may mean that we have to go underground and put the little fish on our door as a symbol like the Roman Christians did back during that day. They had to, most Christians lived in the catacombs, which was the graves underneath the city of Rome. That's where they were driven to live. They never saw the light of day, many of them, because that was where they had to live to be able to practice their faith. And but they were not told to rise up and rebel. I watched a movie one time. I think it was a Cecil B. DeMille's movie, about Christians in the first century, and they were in slavery and they were being marched to their deaths, in the arena. And this one slave turned around and converted the governor because he turned around and beat up some of the guards. Is the gist of the movie. I'm not going to go into the whole thing. And Caesar said, "Oh man, if Christians can fight like that, then I'm going to become a Christian." Pretty stupid, actually, because that wasn't the way they would have looked at it. But that wasn't the way Christians were to act. They went into those arenas saying to the guards, "Come watch us die. We're happy to be dying for our God and our faith." And they would stand there as lions roared toward them and ripped them apart. And their women and their children being killed right in front of their eyes. And were happy to die for their faith. Because they were totally committed to God. And they didn't wish ill upon the government at that time because God put that government in charge. What happened in the very beginning of Christianity, before the persecution came, all of the Christians stayed in Jerusalem. And they all huddled together. But as soon as the persecution happened, they split up, and everywhere they went preaching the gospel. The persecution was sent by God for a purpose. He needed them to stay together for a certain period of time to strengthen them and get them in the position that he needed them to be in to then go out and spread the gospel to the world like he wanted them to. The apostles had to stay with Jesus long enough for Jesus to get them into the position that he could then give them the Holy Spirit. And you remember when Peter said, "Lord, I'll die with you, but I'll never deny you." And then Jesus said, "The cock shall not crow twice before you deny me thrice." And then Jesus turned to Peter and said, "But I have prayed for you, that once you have done this, you will repent. And the Lord will give you the strength to go and carry my name to all the world." And that happened. Because Peter had to make his mistakes and take his lumps, and he had to learn what he needed to learn. In ministry to others, turn with me to Matthew chapter 25. Read verses 31 and 32.
Mind if we read it out of the American Standard?
That's fine, yeah.
Which verses?
I'll tell you what, read verses 31 through 40. I'm sorry, 31 through 40.
But when the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them from one another, as the shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on the left. Then the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundations of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Then the righteous will answer, "Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? And when did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or naked and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and come to you?" The king will answer and say to them, "Truly I say to you, to the extent that you did to one of these brothers of mine, even the least of them, you did it to me.
Okay. And then he, to those on the other side, he says, depart because you didn't do these things. When it comes to ministering to the needs of others, God gives us specific instructions for that. Now, a man who will not work, we're not to let him eat. And that means, I think if that means he starves to death, well, if he's willing to starve to death, I'm willing to let him, if he's not willing to work. But to those who are in need, we're supposed to help them. That's my job as a servant of God. And we might also point out that God has only ever had a remnant of those who call themselves His. When it comes down to in the times of the earth before Noah and the flood, only 8 souls. I don't know how many people were alive on the earth at the time of the flood. I'm going to guess it would have been in the thousands, maybe the 100,000s at least. But there were only 8 souls that were righteous, only a remnant. When Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed, and those great cities, I don't know how many people were in Sodom and Gomorrah, and the 4 cities, or at least 2 other cities that are mentioned that were in the plain with them, in the plain of Shinar. But God destroyed all 4 of those cities, at least 4 cities there. I'm guessing there were over 100,000 people. How many were saved?
What about the original number in the Exodus? And how many from that number, that original, got to the land? 2. Scary.
Yeah.
Scary.
God has only ever had a remnant. And that's all He's ever had. And that's all He really expects to have. Because that's all that are willing to totally commit to Him. Now, when it comes to the local church, some things that we need to look at, and we're just going to hastily go through these. I'm not going to give you anything that's not already in the book here, so we'll just shoot through these. When it comes to discipline, the faithful members in the church cannot consistently condone those who ignore the will of God. It just can't be done. Look at 1 Corinthians chapter 5. It says, deliver such an one to Satan. That's pretty harsh terminology. But that's what we've got to do to someone who is out of duty to Christ. In going to court with one another to settle our differences, don't do it. You can't go to court with your brother in Christ. You go to someone who both of you sees who is a brother in Christ, has good judgment. And you let them deal with your disputes. But you don't take it before the courts of the land. And that's an absolute. In Acts chapter 20, the Lord's church is going to teach the whole counsel of God to those who are its members, without fear or favor, as it said. There have been times when I have preached sermons that have gotten people very angry. I preached a lesson one time that I still don't quite understand what happened fully, but it was on child rearing. Several people came to me after that lesson was over and said, you said some things that I never thought about before in that lesson. But one member of that congregation got very upset about it. And I happened to know, later on finding out who it was, noted that none of his children were faithful. And that might be why he got angry. But did that detract from the truth of the lesson? If it was true, you don't know what the lesson was, so you can't make a judgment. But if the lesson was true, it needed to be preached. And several people did tell me afterwards that it was helpful to them as parents. And that was the purpose of preaching the lesson, was try to help those who were raising their children. But we need to be honest in business and work ethics. We just need to be good people everywhere we go. Here's a question for you. We'll close with this question. And then we'll move on to the next lesson. Lesson number 9 on Thursday night. That one may take 3 sessions, I don't know. Are you a Christian when you get behind the wheel of your car? When person in front of you is going too slow? And are you the kind that's going to wave your fist out the window or something worse? Are you the kind that thinks, you know, that person must be having some trouble and I need to have patience with them? Are you a Christian when you get behind the wheel of the car?